All right, let's just dive right into this explainer, because today we're tackling one of the internet's absolute favorite historical debates, Mount Olympus versus the frozen North, Greek versus Norse mythology. We're going to unpack this ultimate godly showdown, looking at where these legendary deities came from, what they represented, and honestly, why their stories feel so incredibly different to us today. If you spend any time hanging around modern gaming communities, especially around massive titles like God of War, you've probably seen fans constantly asking one very specific question. In a head-to-head fight, who is actually taking the W? The mighty rulers of Mount Olympus or the hardened warriors of Asgard? It's a super fun thought experiment, right? But as you'll see, it actually reveals some seriously deep differences in how these ancient cultures viewed power itself. Take a look at this brilliant quote pulled right from an r/God of War Reddit thread. It literally hits the nail on the head regarding this massive perceived power gap. The user points out that the Olympians essentially shape and control the very fabric of reality. We're talking nature, time, life, and death. Meanwhile, the Aesir gods of the Norse pantheon, well, they bleed, they age, and despite their immense power, they're ultimately just as scared, insecure, and vulnerable as the mortal warriors who worship them. Kind of wild to think about, isn't it?
Section 1. An ancient linguistic crossover.
But here's the thing. We aren't the first ones to put these gods side by side. Way before video game forums existed, ancient humans were doing these exact same comparisons thousands of years ago. There's this historical concept called interpretatio Germanica. According to philologist Rudolf Simic, around the 1st century AD, as the sprawling Roman Empire came into closer contact with Germanic tribes, the two cultures actively translated each other's deities. They were basically looking for the closest equivalents just to understand one another.
And what's absolutely fascinating is how this ancient translation practice literally dictates the days of our week today. The Roman day of Mars, the god of war, became the day of Tyr, Tuesday. Mercury, the traveler, became Odin or Wodenaz, Wednesday. Jupiter, the thunderer, became Thor, Thursday. And Venus, the goddess of love, became Frigg, Friday. The only real exception here is Saturday, which just kept its Roman roots as Saturn's day. So, crazy enough, every time you look at a calendar, you are literally looking at the remnants of this ancient mythological crossover.
Section 2. Tale of the tape.
All right, let's get to the main event. We're going to break down these heavy hitters head-to-head, kind of like a classic sports matchup. At the top of the ticket, we've got the leaders. Zeus rules Olympus through absolute authority, intimidation, and raw power. He literally enforces order with thunderbolts. Now Odin, the All-Father, is remarkably different. He's not just a storm god, he's this ultimate strategist constantly seeking wisdom. I mean, the guy famously sacrificed his own eye at Mimir's well and hung himself on the world tree just to uncover the magical secrets of runes. So one rules by fear, and the other leads through relentless sacrifice and cunning foresight.
Moving to the brawler category, the contrast is even starker. The Greek war god Ares represented pure bloodlust and chaos. Actually, he was pretty widely despised and feared by his own people. Greek warriors usually preferred to pray to Athena for a good strategy. On the flip side, Thor was absolutely beloved. He wasn't just a warrior. He was the relentless protector of humanity, using his hammer and thunder not to dominate mankind, but to shield them against the chaotic giants.
When we look at the goddesses of love and beauty, we run into another deep cultural divide. Aphrodite represents pure, irresistible passion and pleasure. Born from sea foam, she's the ultimate symbol of seduction. But look at her Norse counterpart, Freya. Yes, she's a goddess of love, but she's also a fierce warrior and a sorceress who leads the Valkyries to guide fallen soldiers. Freya's duality as both a lover and a fighter perfectly reflects the much harsher, violent reality of everyday Norse life. And then, of course, we have the trickster bracket, Hermes versus Loki. The Greeks viewed Hermes' wit and cleverness as this charming, almost playful gift. He was a sly messenger and a patron of travelers. But Norse cunning, embodied by Loki, that was viewed as a highly dangerous weapon. Loki's tricks aren't just charming games, they are catastrophic schemes that cause the death of the beloved god Balder and, eventually trigger Ragnarok, the literal doom of the entire world.
Even their realms of the dead contrast drastically. Hades is a fair, respected overseer of a shadowy permanence. His realm isn't necessarily evil, it's just inevitable. But in Norse myth, Hell rules a cold, grim, perfectly silent domain, and Helheim is actively shunned by Norse warriors. They desperately seek to die in battle instead, just so they can reach the glorious feasts of Valhalla. To the Norse, Hells represents the ultimate dread, death without glory.
Section 3. Visualizing the scale.
To really grasp why these pantheons operate so differently, we have to look at how they visualize massive, chaotic forces of nature. Let's use the ocean as our prime example. The Norse didn't really have one single human-like god comfortably ruling the seas. Instead, they viewed the ocean as a primal, monstrous force entirely beyond their control. This terrifying chaos is embodied by giant, unfathomable entities, like Jormungand, the massive world serpent.
In contrast, the Greeks lived in a seafaring culture, where they felt a much stronger sense of mastery or connection to the Mediterranean. So they personified nature into singular, human-like gods, like Poseidon. These gods possessed defined domains, recognizable faces, and personal human emotions. They basically gave the chaos a human face.
Section 4. Primordials versus Mortal Warriors.
So the crucial question here is, why is there such a massive thematic difference between these two supposedly equal mythical lineups? Why are the Greeks like untouched primordials while the Norse act like mortal warriors? Well, research from Virginia Commonwealth University sheds some really fascinating light on this. Greek myth generally focuses on high, noble ideals, heroism, and determination. Their deities are somewhat conventional, they sit comfortably on Olympus sipping ambrosia, and they kind of lack deep, vulnerable personal histories. In stark contrast, the Norse gods nurture this really intimate, agonizing relationship with darker themes, death, betrayal, and finite time. Because they're vulnerable, they actually have to deal with truly human dilemmas, like the heartbreaking death of Baldur.
But honestly, the most staggering difference on this front is immortality itself. Greek gods are truly immortal and completely untouchable. They literally never age. But Norse gods? They are highly vulnerable. They actually require the magical apples of Eden just to stave off the aging process. And worse, they aren't secure in their supremacy. They are fully aware that they are marching toward their inevitable, violent destruction at Ragnarok.
Section 5. Mirrors of their worlds.
All of this brilliantly illustrates that these pantheons aren't just competing in a vacuum. They aren't just characters in a story. They are direct, unflinching reflections of the very people who dreamed them up. Think about it. The Greeks lived in a relatively stable Mediterranean climate, which allowed them to focus on city-states, philosophy, and art. So their gods naturally reflected order, untouchable beauty, and permanence. The Norse, however, were surviving in a freezing, unforgiving winter landscape. Death was just a constant, icy neighbor. Their myths were rooted in bare survival and a warrior lifestyle. So their gods inherently reflected struggle, sacrifice, and inescapable fate. They fought knowing they might lose, because, well, that was the Norse reality.
Section 6. Doomed courage versus eternal glory.
And this brings us to the ultimate payoff of our explainer today, boiling down this entire godly showdown into one central concept, as beautifully stated by one of our sources. Comparing Norse and Greek gods is like comparing fire and ice. One shines with eternal brilliance, the other burns with doomed courage. These two epic storytelling traditions were never actually meant to fight each other in a ring. They're mirrors of the human condition, teaching us drastically different lessons about power, sacrifice, and how we face our destiny.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to ponder. When you look at your own life, the obstacles you face, the things you value, the way you understand the world, do you relate more to the untouchable intellectual pursuit of eternal glory, or the rugged, scrappy acceptance of the struggle? Eternal brilliance or doomed courage? Which set of gods reflects your reality? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this changes how you view these incredible ancient stories.